Where did Greta Thunberg go? Famous climate change activist traveling around the world, telling us that we've stolen her childhood and how dare you. She said that we had 8, maybe 12 years to make these changes to totally shut down fossil fuel production. Otherwise, the world would be irreparably damaged. She actually said we stole her childhood. But where did she go? Ever since the outbreak of the coronavirus, we're starting to see exactly what this is. It's hypocrisy. It's ignorance. One of the things that Greta Thunberg had been championing was completely shutting down fossil fuels. She said, we don't want to wait till 2050 or 2030 or even 2021. It must be done now. Yeah, but if we shut down all fossil fuel use, we'd have no vehicles, we'd have no food, farming would collapse, people would die. It would be horrifying. And what do you think people would say to her when people started dying? They would say, you are wrong. No, we can't do this. Well, that's where we are now. And it's not the same thing. They're not really that connected, though. Interestingly, we are seeing global carbon emissions drop dramatically now that people are quarantining in most countries. We're also seeing other interesting things. Reusable bags in San Francisco banned. You know why? Because they could potentially spread the coronavirus. They're bringing back plastic bags. The U.S. is not even in the top 10 or top 15 contributors to plastic waste in the world, though they are number 20. And it is a serious issue. We don't want to be destroying the planet. We are not the worst. But more importantly, for all of this, Greta Thunberg never called out China. That's the hypocrisy and that's the ignorance. They were pumping out substantially more carbon emissions than we were, or they're a top contributor. They're making all of this plastic waste, all of this garbage. There's smog and the air is filthy and disgusting. And she wouldn't call them out. And now we're facing this pandemic because China was lying. They didn't release the information. We can look, I'm not trying to, be too harsh. I understand that she's a young person. She's very ignorant and naive. And so I want to direct, for the most part, my criticism at the people around her who propped her up and used her as a spokesperson or a mascot for these vanity issues. Now, I know there are other political causes that are more luxury, more likely to be luxury items, or more so luxury items, like these authoritarian social justice politics of woke movies and things. I think climate change is serious, but I think we have much more serious things to deal with. And the way she was going about it was ignoring the real problems, i.e. China, and basically telling us to just sacrifice our poor by shutting down the economy. Well, all of a sudden, we're seeing all of these luxury political items collapsing. The EU is complaining, or they're warning, this could bring about the end of the EU. No one really cares about climate change right now. You know why? People are dying right now. And that's what would have happened if we took her advice. Shutting down fossil fuels, people would die immediately and then they would go nuts. We saw rioting in France for over a year because they increased the fuel tax. I'm not saying I like these things to happen. I'd like a cleaner, safer, better world. But I will point out there are many people who would lie, cheat, deceive, take things out of context, ignore the real threats. Let's read through these stories and see what's going on with the environment, because it seems like this is no longer relevant. Although Greta Thunberg is now trying to link the two. From New Scientist, Greta, we must fight the climate crisis and pandemic simultaneously. The world needs to tackle the coronavirus pandemic and climate change simultaneously and guard against people who try to use the current crisis to delay action on cutting carbon emissions, Greta Thunberg has urged. The Swedish climate activist, who revealed last week that she and her father are likely to have had COVID-19, said the response to the outbreak revealed societal shortcomings, as well as our ability to change in the face of a crisis. But it also proved that we are able to act fast. Quote, if one virus can wipe out the entire economy in a matter of weeks and shut down societies, then that is proof that our societies are not very resilient. It also shows that once we are in an emergency, we can act and we can change our behavior quickly. Still, is she going to mention China and that this could have been averted? I mean, many of the experts are saying if China released the accurate data early on, we could have prevented this. Some politicians have called for climate action to be put on hold while governments grapple with the coronavirus, which the Czech Republic's Prime Minister Andrej Babis saying the European Union should forget about the Green Deal now. Thunberg said, people will try to use this emergency as an excuse not to act on the climate crisis, and that we have to be very careful for. She said she understood the emergency the world was facing now, but it wasn't an excuse to shelve action on emissions. Are you kidding? What do you mean? Emissions are totally down across the board. Politico says emissions are down thanks to coronavirus, but that's bad climate activists will have to carefully navigate political turbulence. Yeah, the hypocrisy is being exposed. You want to sacrifice the lives of millions of people? We're now seeing what happens when economies shut down. Politico reports, climate change activists face a Category 5 political, financial, and economic storm thanks to coronavirus. A month ago, CEOs couldn't stop talking about their sustainability plans and green investments, and activists were gloating about a global movement for green deals. Today, the European Union is postponing climate law debates. The Fridays for Future protests are heading online, and carbon-intensive industries from aviation to oil are looking for bailouts. Any recession is unlikely to be a local blip. That's because the factors driving the initial economic downturn are global, severe, and hitting supply and demand at the same time. While that might cut emissions in the short term, that's little cause for joy. Gernot Wagner, a clinical associate professor at New York University Department of Environmental Studies, told MIT Technology Review, emissions in China are down because the economy has stopped and people are dying, and because poor people are not able to get medicine and food. This is not an analogy for how we want to decrease emissions from climate change. Oh, well, that's coming from a MIT, right? What did Greta say? We want all fossil fuels shut down, not even by 2021 now. And then you would see dead people, a lack of medicine. You would see the harsh shutdown of both supply and demand at the same time, and people would have no access and they would die. The sheer hypocrisy, I swear. Here's what they say. She's quoted. People don't want to hear about the climate crisis now. I completely understand that. But we have to make sure that it's not forgotten. We need to treat both of these crises at the same time because the climate crisis will not go away. The campaigner and the Fridays for Future movement, which she kickstarted with her future school strike in 2018, have made their weekly protests virtual during the pandemic. Students have been good at staying off the streets, said Thunberg. And although young people tend to have milder symptoms of the disease, we still stand in solidarity with those in risk groups. And I think that is a very beautiful thing. Thunberg has had mild symptoms of COVID-19 with some tiredness and a cough, but said that the more intense ones that her father experienced fit with the symptoms of the illness exactly. Neither have been tested, as Sweden is only testing the most severe cases. Let's talk about the sheer hypocrisy. She's Swedish. Sweden has a much more severe outbreak than, say, Norway. At least that's what I'm being told. Sweden, I've seen reports, is doing very little to stem the outbreak. They're ignoring this actual crisis, which is damaging the economy and hurting people, causing mass death. And we can see what, even in her circumstance, she's not getting adequate treatment. Why would I take the word of people, in this country when this is how they respond to an actual global crisis and people are losing their lives? I don't want to paint you a picture that I'm saying Greta Thunberg is the Swedish government, right? But you look at her country and you see how they're treating this. Why would I listen to these activists? I'm sorry. I'm just not interested. They say 2019 was incredible for Thunberg. She was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Luxury politics. It's so easy to say, in 12 years, the planet might be damaged. And what does that really mean? Look, I get it. Climate change is a problem. We don't want to be frogs boiling, just sitting there waiting for the world to bubble around us. We want to take things seriously. We want to invent new technology and make the world a better place. But think about all of the lies that have been espoused recently about how certain treatments are bad, then they're good. Why would I trust any of these lefty activist types when every single thing Trump says is wrong? He comes out and says, things are going to get bad. And they say Trump is fear-mongering. He says things are going to be okay. And they say Trump is downplaying. Trump says, hey, we got a treatment for you. And they say Trump is touting a dangerous cocktail of drugs. So I'm going to trust these activists now? No, we're actually getting a glimpse of what we could have expected if we went forward with her plan. Now, here's where it gets interesting. There's actually being a walk back of a lot of these environmental policies. I'm not necessarily saying I'm a fan, but it's important to point out the U.S. is not one of the largest, arguably, we are not one of the largest contributors of plastic waste in the world, though we are a contributor, for sure. There's a lot of plastic waste we're making. We should recycle this and we should deal with this problem. But why isn't Greta Thunberg calling out China? That's always been the big question. One of the worst polluters, and India. Yet it's always about what we do in the West. Welcome back, plastic bags. Single-use plastic bags are a miracle of modern technology. Cheap, light, convenient, and ubiquitous. They provide an elegant solution to a problem. If you recycle them, as most people do, and put your rubbish in them, that creates a net reduction in carbon emissions compared with buying the heavier, thicker garbage bags sold in stores. Best of all, they're sanitary. Cue up a head-spinning headline. San Francisco has just banned the use of reusable tote bags and switched back to single-use plastic bags to help fight the spread of the coronavirus. In New Hampshire on March 21st, Governor Chris Sununu signed an executive order to the same effect. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker followed suit on March 25th. A Maine ban on plastic bags was due to take effect on April 22nd, but has just been pushed back until next year. So we're going to use the plastic bags now, but we recognize that there is an inherent risk of infectious disease from reusable bags. Then why don't we just recycle the plastic ones better and keep using them because they're sanitary? Well, how does this make sense? Whoever could have warned us that cloth tote bags were unhygienic? Well, there was this New York Post columnist who wrote 6 years ago, reusing the earth-friendly tote gradually turns it into a chemical weapon, and noted that plastic bags were associated in one study with a 46% increase in death from foodborne illnesses. Plastic bag bans were associated with a 46% increase in deaths from foodborne illnesses. Cloth tote bags are inconvenient. They're eco-unfriendly, more carbon emissions than single-use plastic, unless you use them more than 14 times, which people tend not to do. And oh, by the way, they're deadly. So what was the impetus behind the plastic bag bans in the first place? Liberals find plastic annoying. Think of liberalism as a teen girl disgust from the movie Inside Out, who comically overreacts to everything that makes her uncomfortable, except when liberals say, ew. They quell their emotional reactions with regulation. Occasionally, you'll see a plastic bag stuck in some branches or a storm drain, and liberals can't have that. Ew. Well, I will also point out, I remember when they said, stop using paper bags because we got to save the trees, man. Start using plastic bags. They're better. Now we're going back to using paper bags and using reusable bags. Now, the paper bags are maybe a solution, but we have another environmentalist report coming out that the U.S. is losing trees. So you know what? There's never going to be a right answer, and therein lies the big problem. Some people have said the problem is there are too many human beings. Yeah, maybe that's it. What do you do? What do you propose? Well, Greta has proposed cutting off fossil fuels, which would result in millions of people dead. I don't think she understands the full gravity of what she's saying, but she also wrote an op-ed talking about colonialism and patriarchy, so I'm pretty sure she has no idea what she's talking about. We don't want to implement programs that are going to result in tons of people dying. We're going to have to invent new technology. We're going to have to invent our way out of this. That's the best thing we can do. Here's a quote. You see them hanging in trees in poor communities like bizarre Christmas ornaments, the New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said last April. They're all over the waterways. There's no reason for them. It's about time we ban them. So Cuomo did in fact ban them starting March 1st. Although because the ban is not due to be enforced until May 15th, some New York stores still offer them, even as others have already yanked them. You can imagine the grinding noise that must be taking place in the back of Cuomo's mouth these days as he considers the possibility that he was wrong. The state of New York has taken breathtakingly extreme and unprecedented steps to slow the spread of the virus. But because no politician ever wants to admit he made a mistake, especially right after pushing through a policy change, so far, Cuomo hasn't called for restoring the plastic bag policy of just 5 weeks ago to fight the virus. Even if this is so obviously a good idea that even San Francisco has bowed to reality. If Cuomo thinks there's no reason for plastic bags, he hasn't thought very much about the matter. Picture what it might be like to do, say, an August run to pick up groceries, then get the kids, then take them to their judo lessons, then come back home. All the while, there are packages of ground beef dripping and seeping into the reusable cloth tote bag in the trunk. Is it wise to keep reusing that cloth tote bag? You might forget to wash it. You might not be aware that bacteria are collecting in the bottom of the bag, bacteria being famously small and hard to spot. If you're really eco-conscious, you might know that every time you wash a cloth tote bag in your washing machine, you generate more carbon emissions than would be produced by simply manufacturing a fresh plastic bag. And that's very interesting. Now, I don't need to embrace the exaggeration of leaky beef packs in your reusable tote bag. And I'll even go one step further and say it's probably a bunch of hippy-dippy vegans who are using these reusable tote bags in the first place. But think about every product at a grocery store. You know that people pick things off the shelf, look at it, and put it back, right? Now you got whatever germs and whatever nonsense on that product. Look, everybody does. You grab the thing, you look at the nutrition label. Ooh, does this have, gluten in it? And you put it back. How much salt is in this? You put it back. Then you walk up and grab it, put it in your bag, and all of that is in that bag, and it stays there. Not forever. Virus is not forever, but a lot more than if you used a one-time use plastic bag and then threw it away, or used it for your dog's business outside, or you just recycled it. And yes, if everyone went about buying these cloth plastic bags and washing them, well, they say that there would be more emissions being pumped out. It seems like a lot of these policies don't take into consideration the negative impacts because they're just feel-good policies. I remember I was flying through Texas and the waitress at one of these restaurants gave me a paper straw. And I started laughing. I was like, you guys got paper straws now, huh? And she was like, yeah, the state's making us do it. It makes no sense. Some kid wrote an essay in some other state. Now we got to use paper straws. Yeah. Now, I don't know if this is true, but I heard that U.S. plastic straw use isn't a major contributor to plastic pollution. It's just something that people said feels good. Well, who wants to drink out of a paper straw? Those things are nasty. Nobody does. So Trump ended up making his own plastic straws, sending them out, and he made like $1 million or some ridiculous number selling them. I'm not here to say that we should use plastic all the time. Well, the point I'm trying to make is right now we're realizing that the immediate harm we're facing from coronavirus is pressing and that we don't have the luxury of this, these eco feel-good policies, which many people contest would actually do anything in the first place. And actually, this article is arguing the reusable cloth bags are actually worse. Sure, you don't see plastic milling about. And, maybe the issue there is stop littering, recycle better. If we're going to use these old bags, I don't even necessarily care about the old bags. The point is, it is a luxury item to complain about 12 years in the future. It really is. I don't like it. I don't like the idea that humans don't think ahead. But when you have serious issues to deal with, you realize maybe there were mistakes made along the way. Maybe there are more important things. And maybe the main point, if we follow through with plans to shut down all fossil fuel use, it is pie in the sky utopian nonsense that would result in this catastrophe. Oil prices are tanking. Demand is crippled for everything. People aren't working. Could you imagine if no one could drive because we got rid of fossil fuels? Like now, I mean, because Greta said we're not going to wait till 2050. Could you imagine if right now they're like, okay, we've banned all fossil fuels? The whole world would stop immediately and we would have millions upon millions of dead overnight. And then the pitchforks and the torches come out. And they're going to go after the people that shut it all down. That's literally what happened in France. Okay, not entirely, but they put a tax on fuel for climate change reasons and people started rioting. I don't like it, but what do? We need to invent our way out of this one. So for the time being, you know what? The environmentalism has been washed away and we're really starting to learn some things are just, maybe we're bored. We have no purpose. We need to make up a purpose. Well, congratulations. You have a purpose now. All right. We're all quarantined. Everyone's freaking out to a certain degree. These issues that we can see the hypocrisy. I'll just reiterate and then I'm done. I promise. If we shut down our fossil fuel use the way she said, this is what you get. And no one's happy with it. People can't work. People are going to go hungry. The rent isn't being paid. It makes no sense. We need other solutions. We shouldn't be propping up emotional, ignorant teenagers who don't know what they're talking about. I'll see you all in the next segment coming up at 4 p.m. youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out.